All right, everybody. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Katy podcast. And as you all know, the mission of my podcast is really for us to figure out our greatness in business and in our personal life so we can bring that greatness to the world through a brand. I do this for two reasons, this podcast. I truly care about humanity, and I want us all to see how we could succeed and be whole and complete. And also because I struggle with my own stuff of being less than, just like anyone else. And some days are more ugly than others. And our guests really, really enlighten me and teach me. And boy, today are we in for a treat. I have got the one, the only Dr. Patrick Scott. And let me tell you a little bit about his background because he's going to be humble and not say anything. Dr. Patrick Scott holds a PhD in clinical hypnotherapy, a Master of Social Work, and a Bachelor of Science in Education. And he specializes in depression, anxiety, trauma recovery, addictions, and phobia. And he's got offices in Las Vegas, and he works virtually, and he's licensed in California, Nevada, and Minnesota. And most importantly, I think Dr. Scott is one of the most balanced people I know, and the fact that his approach is pragmatic, compassionate, but really focuses on Eastern medicine, Western medicine, medicine in general, psychology, psychiatry. I don't even know because I'm a lawyer. I don't have all those letters after my name. I just have two. But he also has the side that is so caring and always shows up, you guys. I've never seen anyone so busy always show up. So was I surprised when he said, yes, I'll do your podcast? No. However, every time he says yes, I'm like, wow, like there he is again, serving humanity. So thanks for being here with me,
Pleasure.
Scott.
Lovely to see you. Thank you.
So how this all started was I was at a class of Dr. Scott's, and he was talking about the nature of relationships. And I really focused in on that part because I run a program called the Apology Tax Workshop, and it's really about the nature of women not leaving behind $500,000 on the table for every 10 years of their career because they can't negotiate their own value. And this is not about misogyny or the incomplete aspect of, men running the world. It really is about unity and tapping into that from an economic perspective. The companies and the law firms are losing out on that money when the women don't bring in the clients because we're not negotiating our value. We're stopping short somewhere and we don't even know it. But it's also the greater picture of unity and what it feels like to reconcile this notion that we all have masculine, feminine energies. So Dr. Scott was talking about it, and I asked him to come on this podcast and delve into that. I am by no means an expert in that. I want to learn because I find in the workshops it's incredibly important for women. I mean, I had never understood that there was a deep harmony we're seeking between the masculine and feminine energies in all of us, regardless of how we identify our gender. So with that, I want to turn it over to you and just wherever you feel is an appropriate place to start. It's going to be good one way or another.
Sure. So, in the class that you attended, we talked about Jung's concept of the anima and the animus. And so really the goal as humans that we seek is internal unity or wholeness. And so in many cultures, there's a masculine and a feminine idea, right? And I know in my own culture, I was raised in the upper Midwest, boys had, and I'll be 67 in 2 weeks. And so in my own, baby boomer culture, boys were expected to do certain things and girls were expected to do certain things. And now I run a psychiatric clinic and I'm on medical school faculties and I train psychiatrists, I train psychologists and social workers and things like that. And we are kind of in a relational crisis about what it means to be male, what it means to be female. And I've worked in corporate America doing trainings, also, and I'm going to use some cliches, and I mean no disrespect, but I think you know the drill. If a man is angry, he's a man, and if a woman's angry, she's a bitch. If
Yeah.
a man is soft, he must be gay or feminine or overly feminine. And we have extremes of toxic masculinity, used misogyny as a word in our public discourse, and we have really toxic femininity too. And I live in Las Vegas, work in Las Vegas, where I see the extremes. I see people who are yeah, at the extreme. Now, in ancient times, if you follow any sort of spiritual or religious tradition, the goal is the balancing and the harmonizing of the masculine and the feminine. Because if you talk about source or God or whatever your source is, there are examples in all the scriptures, universally of male and female energy. And there's some really great books that I'll recommend toward the end of our talk today that can really help some of your viewers really get in some touch with this.
I
Uh,
need to stop you for a second and unpack something very important because if I'm thinking it, I know my listeners are thinking it
sure.
too. Because we're just going to assume that if you're a listener and you've never heard anything like this, you're going to need a little more explanation because Dr. Patrick Scott is so well versed in this. Can you explain the origin of how we, because if I'm a woman, I've never heard this, and we're like, I have male energy. I know I get pissed a lot sometimes, and I'm a lawyer and I work in a man's world. But what do you really mean when you say we as people, as humans, carry both masculine and feminine energy?
Yeah, and so it is true, and so we in our Western society have villainized and we've presented masculine energy, the macho idea, and it's toxic, but then there's feminine energy that's really toxic too. And so at the extremes, little girls, a great example, are the little girls who look at magazines and think that that they have to be really thin, and that what it means to be a woman is dot
Yeah,
dot dot
yeah.
and that what it means to be a man is dot dot dot. And so I'm not talking about gender, I'm not talking about sexual orientation here. I'm talking about that all humans possess the energies and the abilities of masculine and feminine. I have a friend in Montana who's a very Montana guy, and he and I partner in doing corporate training for healthcare organizations. And he jokes, he says, I am the gayest straight guy in the world. And I said, why? Because, well, I make emollients and I raise bees and I do all this stuff. Well, now it's his best attempt to say that he has some feminine aspects that in his culture would be seen as something, right? Now, I think we've made a lot of progress. I think it's okay. My concern is out of the enculturation, since you're talking to a largely female audience, about, must you be so? Must you be so difficult? Must you be so strong? And like I said, the example is if you show up and you are assertive, you're perceived as aggressive. And aggression is usually universally seen as negative. And so masculine energy, and even if you take it out of the gender idea, we have we talk about left brain and right brain, whereas right brain is more orderly and organized and sequential and spreadsheet and all that kind of stuff, whereas left brain is more by association, creative, radiant, artistic, if you will. And so I think sometimes people get hung up on gender, that it's male, female. But no, these are qualities that people have. Now, people that I would imagine, who are balanced, they can be assertive and strong in a board meeting, and they can go paint a picture. Now notice I'm not saying a male or a female, that they have
Right.
actually aspects of creativity and radiance and association, and they also can be extraordinarily linear and directive and authoritative. And
And
that's what we're looking for.
and is the goal then not to do that necessarily really well outside in separate settings? The way you described it was two different environments. One was in the art studio, one was in the boardroom.
Right?
Yet to show up in a corporate setting and be able to say your piece and be assertive but not aggressive and still own who you are as, okay, we'll just stick with my audience, women lawyers who often say,
Right.
I don't know who I am anymore. I don't feel authentic and I don't like being so. we work in a man's world. And so you should lean into that, I always say, but not so far as to lose who you are. And I'm getting from what you're saying, what I'm really saying to them is you can't go so far into your masculine energy that you can't show up in a boardroom and own being a woman and not have to be called a bitch to get the results you want. Is that fair to say?
I'm flashing on the Tom Hanks movie, The League of Their Own. There's no crying in baseball, where
Yes, exactly, right?
and the reality there's crying everywhere, and that
Everywhere.
there's crying everywhere. Boys cry, girls cry, everybody cries, and so it's totally okay. And so what I love about where we're going and what's manifesting is you get to be all of who you are. Now, if you feel as though you have shape shifted and sold out, and in order to be successful had to function. Now, I know many entrepreneurs, and attorneys are largely entrepreneurial, many of them. And you get to do it any way you want. You get to, and what I'm looking for is what's really effective. And what's effective is being whole and being grounded and living a long time. And that means certainly owning your power, but also owning, and what it looks like really in practice is maybe you are the CEO, you are the chief partner of the law firm, and you have to make decisions all day. And how about you come home and you let yourself be nurtured? You let yourself, you don't have to be the powerhouse at home. It doesn't have to be, 24/7 that you're, the driving. I have a daughter who's an entrepreneur and she runs restaurants and she has a wonderful balance. She's Thai, she's adopted, clearly, and she is a chef and just do the math, man. She scares me, with the cleaver, the whole thing. And she is running all of these restaurants and she does a great job. And then she's married to a delightful man. And it's very clear when she surrenders to her feminine abilities. She is a girly girl. She loves nice things. She loves jewelry. And she doesn't have to be the hard driving entrepreneurial CEO chef
And
owner of multiple successful restaurants at every minute. She can actually pull that behavior up and own all of that. And there's nothing masculine about her. Really, you would not know. I mean, she's a little scary with the cleaver when she's pissed, but that's not like she's trying to be a man. She's
I
just knows what it takes to run those businesses.
I have to just pause there and take this in because you hit something very deep for me, which means I know it hit something deep for practicing women lawyers or practicing women managing partners and CEOs. It's this ability to have enough self-awareness, which is where I'm going to guess you're going to say it starts, to be able to know that I can is the right phrase, turn it off. I can access, that's the better
Mhm.
phrase I want to say, Dr. Scott, access that other part of me. I have this dream, I have this picture of myself that when I leave the job as the person who runs this business, I can go home and put on my 1950s dress that Beaver Cleaver's mom or whoever, Joan Cleaver. For those of
That's right.
you who have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Just picture somebody in the 1950s who's got a beautiful floral dress on.
You're a little young for that, but I'll go with it. Okay.
Thank you. At 54, I thank you. But whatever version of that you want to see, but I can switch gears and go home and bake cookies or something and really own that as my feminine power too, and allow myself to be nurtured. Or if I'm the woman at work, is the managing partner, I can go home and allow the nurturing to shift to where that when I make dinner for my family, if I don't want to allow someone to make me dinner, fine, it's a choice. But when I make that meal, I'm nurturing myself too and allowing others to take care of me. Maybe somebody does the dishes. So we're not always driving from the same perspective, which I find burns me out and makes
Correct.
me angry.
It's about your authenticity. You should not, no one, none of us should have to shape shift and be someone we're not to be successful. Now, I am talking about being effective. There are behaviors in the workplace that are effective, and I run several businesses. Um, and it's not about gender, but it is about, whatever's effective. And I don't know the skill set of an attorney. I have attorneys, many of them, and I understand that the ones I really appreciate and pay well are very clear and very organized and very intelligent and very assertive,
Is that the
like that.
behaviors you're talking about then?
Yes.
Would you say
Yeah.
those are the, Okay.
Yeah, to be
So,
effective in your job. Now, that's not necessarily your personality. Your personality can be whatever it is. My concern is that I think we've sold people, particularly in Western culture, a bill of goods, that this is what girls do and this is what boys do. And I think it's better than it was. Um, and I still think that we all can be effective in being authentically ourselves by looking at the behaviors that are successful in any given thing. So when you talk about women in particular leaving $500,000 on the table, I'm suspecting you mean that they're not as authoritative as they could be. They're not as assertive as they could be.
exactly.
That they're not
Yeah, well, we
owning all of their power for fear of being called the bitch or the cast iron, whatever it is. And I think that there's behaviors in there by owning all of who you are. And there's a lot of great examples, out there.
well,
Uh,
and that's exactly it, not owning our power because we feel like we would then have to be really responsible for the outcome. At
mhm,
least that's how I feel. For instance, just looking at this workshop, if
mhm.
I really own my power, it's not about fear of owning my power. It's about when I own my power, am I going to be responsible enough to deliver exactly what I said I would deliver to these people?
Yeah,
And that shows up at work all the time. And this notion of responsibility, I don't know what it's like for men. I can imagine because I've had many male CEO clients who are like, I just wish everybody would leave me alone because it's a lot of CEOs tell me they can't sleep at night because they're responsible for putting food on the table
right.
for so many of their employees.
Mhm.
That level, so that's all I know about the man's perspective. But as far as the woman's perspective, it's this responsibility for giving our best. And I think what you said was incredibly important. This ability to be effective, which is not our personality, right? But I have a question for you. I always take the naysayers approach here because a lot of people who listen are like, wait a minute. So you said we have been sold a bill of goods about girls do this and boys do that. What do you say to the person that's listening and going, well, what's so bad about that, especially with the way the world is kind of playing out, especially in the US on a greater scale. And I don't want this to be a political podcast at all, but it is really what we're seeing in the world, depending on what your perspective is. But I think we can all agree on that. Like we're going back to a notion that a lot of this country has worked to overcome. Is that the phrase? So, what do you say to people that say, well, what's wrong with that?
Well, I don't think that there's anything wrong with gender roles.
Mm.
I think to the extent as we all measure our effectiveness, and I'm thinking of some great examples of women, female leaders that I've just looked up to for my whole life. And I do an exercise in one of my workshops called the Board of Directors. Like if you had 5 individuals, living or dead, real or imagined, you could put on an imaginary board of directors, who would it be? And, Oprah Winfrey is on my list. I love her. I think she's great. Maya Angelou. I'm not going to give you my whole list, but Maya Angelou, if you remember the poet
Yes,
laureate,
of course, of
um,
course.
it just such a great. Michelle Obama, is extraordinarily all of who she is, and feminine and direct and an attorney. And I look at Mother Teresa. If you've read anything about Mother Teresa,
Oh, yeah.
she's a little sweet Indian lady, and oh my God, what a powerhouse! What a force of nature. No confusion about, female, male. It's not even about, that's what I'm saying. It's not a gender thing. But I think that if you all can look into your life of who are the women who have that striking sense of all of who they are with their femininity. They're not trying to be a man. They're not trying to be male or overly masculine or overly dominating. They are completely 100% female and absolutely such a powerhouse. Now there are other women that I'm not going to mention who are extraordinarily overbearing and strong that I'm not that I can think of a dozen of those as well. But I think we have some really great examples of leaders, people that I have followed that I just think are just wonderful. Toni Morrison is an author who's written some just very powerful works, and I think we have so many great examples of folks in the public eye who are doing the work. Now we have other examples of that hyper femininity. If you look at the whole and I don't want to use a name, but the whole luxury culture of what it means that you have to have the certain kind of car and the certain nails and the certain
Yes.
whatever all that bling is. There's
We
that.
talk
And we
about
have it in the male culture as well. You have to have a certain body, a certain
certain
body fat
car.
percentage, all that kind of thing. So I think we have examples in the public eye of people who are extraordinarily well balanced, who are very powerful, but not in an ineffective way.
We talk about that a lot, actually, the luxury goods market. Uh, and how I finally discovered this to be my truth, and it's been resonating with a lot of women who like luxury goods. However, I had to get to a point, and I'm always working on this. Lord knows, I'm iterative, as you all know, Dr. Scott. But when I got to a point where I was like, this, I don't know, pair of shoes, sunglasses, handbag does not define me. It does not build up my self-confidence to carry it, wear it. However, it's a solid representation of me right now. And when I look at it, it's congruent and it makes me feel good. That's
Hmm.
when I got my
Yeah,
luxury whatever.
yeah,
And
nothing
I
wrong.
explain that really deeply to women because I think that's what you were talking about. Because I spent most of my career in Washington, D.C., strapping down my chest, straightening my curly hair in the morning because I just needed to be a man in order to
Must you
survive
be
and get
so?
by.
Yeah. Don't
Yeah,
be
must you
too.
be so? Yeah, yeah. And that is why I left the practice because I had lost my sense of self. That's not what I would have told you then, though. I would have said, I got no problem here. I'm just hanging out. I'm just done, right? I hear that a lot. I'm fine. My focus really in law firms is the attrition crisis. When I say when women hit, or men even, but mostly women hit that 212 degrees where you have steam, they just jettison right out of their seats and they're gone, even though they're high performers, and you can't figure out why. So my goal is to have us not get to that point, whatever our role is, right? And so we can go home and wear our hair down or put on our work boots and take that axe and go chop wood if that's what feels whole and authentic. And I love your point about being effective. Now, can you talk a little bit to us about the science about this, about Jung's concept of anima and animus? Because I was fascinated by that.
It's old. It's 100 years old. And so Carl Jung was a psychiatrist, a Swiss psychiatrist back in the day, 100 years ago. A peer. It's funny, because I obviously deeply rooted in psychology. So people say, oh, he was a student of Freud. They were kind of friends. I wouldn't put them as student, mentor, disciple. Jung was considered to be quite the renegade. This is Carl Jung, and you can look him up. And he said that, and this is psychological theory, meaning that when we become human, we were born, and we're in a male body, we have what is called an anima. And the anima is our projection of our ideal female partner. Our ideal the ideal female partner. That's called the anima. And it's a projection, meaning we are in a male body and we are projecting out an anima, which can be, and it has nothing to do with sexual orientation. And that's a whole nother concept that I'm deeply rooted in with just psychiatry right now because so much with LGBTQ rights and trans, and it's not what I'm talking
Right,
about.
right.
Humans in whatever male body there is going to have an anima. Females are going to have an animus. And so when we talk jokingly about daddy issues or mommy issues, this is what we're talking about. So let's just use the business. You're as a female audience, you hatch my joke. You have a daddy or you don't, and you have projected an ideal avatar of a male figure in your life, whether you have one or not, whether
But
you
whether
have
you have one or not.
whether you
Okay.
have one or not, you have an internal representation of a
Okay.
projection of what the ideal man looks like. And you go up, this is Carl Jung now, you go about the tasks throughout your developmental stages of finding that man. And this is the little kid who says, Daddy, I'm going to marry you. Or when they're a kid, or Daddy, I want to do what you do, or I want to be like you when I grow up, or whatever. And it is gender. And so, because a male is going to project a feminine ideal, a female is going to project a masculine ideal. And the masculine ideal is, who am I attracted to? Who do I want to have as a partner eventually? And so the joke, it's a psychology joke that when we have daddy issues, we are attempting to find the long lost father that we never had, or whatever that is. There is some truth to that. I still think it's funny. And I just had a lady in here last hour who, is replicating that in,
Uh,
psychotherapy, that she's going through a divorce and, from a narcissist, and on and on and on. And so it happens every day in therapy. But that is the theory of anima animus, is that we have this ideal picture and that we go about the task of trying to find and mate with that picture.
so is there a lot of cleanup, let's just call it that, whether you want to use the word baggage or whatever, around that issue when we're looking to
It
be
is
whole,
why I'm employed.
whole and
I
sound
have
and effective
job
at work?
security because and please hear me, all of us have baggage. No human gets through this lifetime without going through, and I see it from an even larger perspective, that this is what we're here to do. We're here to polish ourselves. We're here to learn our lessons. We're here,
Sure.
and so the balancing, and of course, what you articulated prior to us getting on air is, we seek wholeness, and the extremes are not whole. And so I'm just going to use the person I had in here last hour.
Mhm.
Uh, Genealogically, all the women in her bloodline, alcoholic, narcissistic, and so she earned it, and that was her avatar. Her animus was this particular male figure of very strong but very narcissistic, which is lacking self-worth, right?
Interesting. So, what did you just say? So, if we're seeking to be effective at work, what do you say to the woman professional in leadership right now who's listening and going, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have extremes. I'm effective at work. I can think of
Right.
one particular person who is the top biller, and I'm 54. She's a good, I'm going to guess 10 years older than me. Top biller for years on end in a very large law firm.
Sure.
She likes that masculine approach. If I ask her, she says,
If
my
if
husband and I
it's
don't have a relationship much, but
uh,
I'm planning on even working when I'm retired. I'm going to set up shop somewhere and just support the law firm without getting paid. To me, that doesn't feel whole. But when
okay.
you talk to people like that, they're like, well, what's wrong? Nothing's broken. I'm doing my thing. What do you say to that, Dr. Scott?
I say, it's in the eye of the beholder. And
True.
it's not, trust me, I do this all day long.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
it's not broke, don't fix it. If the person, whoever it is effective and satisfied and happy and feels whole, if it's not an issue. Now, insight being what it is, us out here may see that it doesn't look very balanced, but it's maybe not our business. I certainly don't go, I've got enough to do. I don't go around saying, well, you look out of balance and you look out of balance. If this person believes that they're whole and they're healed and they're not asking you for help, I say leave them alone. If it's not broke, don't fix it. If,
Mm.
on the other hand, you are overwhelmed and stressed out and you feel like you're shape shifting and you're not your authentic self and you're feeling kind of guilty about that, and you feel as though your life is out of balance by virtue of again, shape shifting, of having to because you know at a very deep level when you're not showing up. There's some feedback that's very powerful. It's one thing for someone outside of us to point at us and say, you're not living congruently with your values. You say you're about XYZ, but I don't see you doing that. That's powerful feedback, right?
Yeah.
It's more powerful feedback to look in the mirror and go, I'm not living the life that I say that I want.
That's tough,
I
though.
have, that is very powerful, and that requires therapy usually. Meaning, because it's one thing, because we can say, I don't really care what other people think. I am my own
Right.
person.
Exactly,
It's a whole
exactly.
nother thing to look in the mirror and go, I don't know who I am. I think you articulated that. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I have so shape shifted into somebody that I am not in order to be successful for an external reason, money, fame,
Right.
fortune, bling, Gucci, whatever it is, that I've lost a sense of my own purpose, my own reason for being. And that's when it's time to start evaluating where the extremes are. Where have you sold out?
So
Where have
if
you
someone is
compromised your own values?
if someone's listening to this podcast and has gotten to this point, I think it's safe to say that they are curious enough about themselves or for somebody else, hopefully for themselves, because like you said, we can't change other people. We can only work on ourselves and that will affect others. If they're listening at this point and going, okay, if I want to look in the mirror and start this process, I'm making a lot of money, likely. That's generally my audience. Something feels off. I'm not happy. What do I look for in the mirror initially to kind of gauge that I'm going in the right direction with the inquiry? Because while nothing may be officially broke, something doesn't feel right in my life as
Well,
of
I would look at the arenas that we talk about. Certainly, I would be self-evaluating, my values. Am I living congruently to my values, not the corporate values, not the law firm values, not
right.
my values? Am I living in my own integrity? Am I living in my own loyalty? Am I living in my own? So values and self-reflection there. I would look at physical health, and you know my story. I didn't, and so
Yes.
I'm not the I actually am the poster child for failing to do that, and I'm not going to get into it. I'm better now because I did look in the mirror one day in chemo and go, what am I, working 20 hours a day and, all that stuff. So if you're circling the drain and your physical health and your mental health and your wellness is not well, and you have so sacrificed and compromised out of the chasing of the partnership or the money or the bling or the whatever it is, then I think that warrants your attention if your health. Because in our 20s and 30s, our bodies are extraordinarily resilient. And as sorry, but I get to say it, our bodies aren't as resilient as we get into our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And if
Yes.
you want to live a good long time, and what was painful for me was I preach wellness. Let me actually teach it, and for me to not, and to have to look in the mirror one day and go, I'm such a fraud because I'm here out preaching mental health, spiritual health, physical health, and I'm a train wreck. So I think if you can look
Mm.
physical, mental, spiritual, if you can look at financial, organizational, your values, your needs, how are you meeting your needs? How's your mood? Are you cranky all the time? Are you snapping at those you love? Because those who you love get it. You can hold it together at work. And when you get home, and if your kids, your family, your dog, whoever it is getting the brunt of your grumpiness, that's something to pay attention to. They love you anyway. They're going to love you anyway. But I would say, are you the person you want to be? Like, who do you want to be if they never change, if it never changes? Because that's the only thing that you can directly control is yourself, what you do and how you think.
So who do I want to
Who
be
do
if no
I
one around
want to be? Who do I choose to be if they never change or if it never changes?
no one around me?
Yeah.
Now, if I'm listening to this podcast, and I can think of a couple of powerful women lawyers I've talked to in the past week about enrolling in the apology text workshop, and they're maybe in their late 30s. They've got small children. They haven't gotten to the point that you and I are talking about. I mean, I had the C word too, right? I went through that too. It was an experience for sure that really has made me something today that I'm grateful for. However, it was an experience, like you said. Um, those people are mostly looking for, I want to grow my practice area. I want to get into a new practice area. I want to be able to cultivate clients on my own instead of waiting for the partners above me to send me clients. And I tell them, you are already paying the apology tax. You're not making a business case for yourself. You're preserving relationships instead of really making a business case for who you are or leading with numbers and data instead of gratitude. I mean, it's good to be grateful for every job you get. However, at some point, you can't be leading with, oh, thank you for this job. Thank you for the work. You have to lead with, hey, I'm worth it. And they're not seeing the trend. And I know you're going to say, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it. However, there's got to be a way to help people wake up before. Well, if there's a way to do that, and maybe your answer is no, Katy, everyone has to go through their own journey, and that might involve cancer like you and I went through, and stop trying to create problems where there's no problems.
Well, okay. So I would have you look, this is my good friend Deepak Chopra. I don't know if you've heard this, but he talks about the stages of death, which is a really interesting thing. And bear with me. He says that, us high-powered people who are doing the Lord's work, as it were, and we're doing the first sign that we are not doing well really is fatigue. And so I would have all of your viewers of regardless of what age, is if you are bone tired. I'm not talking about missing a night's sleep. I'm talking about bone weary, tired. That the first sign of the circling the drain, as it were, is fatigue. And how are you? And again, I go back to the basics. I don't care what age you are. Certainly, your use of drugs and alcohol, your use, how's your sleep, the basics, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is. The second indicator marker that he talks about in terms of dangers signs is accidents. And this is so interesting to me. He talks about that we become, when we are not taking care of ourselves, we're overworking, we become fatigued, that we become very accident prone. And I mean everything from dropping things to car accidents that aren't our fault to not being in the right place at the right time. And we just become more accident prone. This was certainly true for me. The next stage is immune suppression. If you're getting every bug out there, every cold, every flu, every season, you've got to do the flu shot, all that kind of stuff. That's a third indicator that leads into disease, if you're having disease processes regardless of age. And then finally he says that, left unchecked, we just check out, we actually pass away from this kind of stuff. And so I would have your viewers of whatever age, you know build your business, do all of that, but I would love it to be life affirming. Not, I would love it to be decisive contribution, life affirming. And I don't know enough about the mechanics of being an attorney and marketing and all that sort of thing about how does one become a successful attorney. I work largely in the medical field, as you know, with physicians, and I work with neurosurgeons, and neurosurgeons have the
Ooh,
young, they die young because they haven't figured out a way. And I'm bless them, they make the most money too, but there is a direct correlation between how much call can you do. And so I would. And then what's important? Now, I'm not saying don't be successful and don't build your practice and all that kind of stuff. I would love to say that you will be better at building it the healthier you are.
fair enough. Fair enough. That's a lot of information. So, if we were going to wrap this up by having you take it back to the wholeness of being able to be effective by being whole and grounded and actually reconciling the male and the female inside you, what would be the point you want to leave the listeners with as a thought for the day out of your brilliant mind?
You aren't broken. You don't need fixing. You are perfect just as you are. And your job is to find out who you are. And the and where have you, if you have, compromised your identity in the pursuit of a career or of some external reward? Take the male and female out of it because we all have it. Where could you use some nurturing? Where could you use some organization? Where could you use some authoritative power? Where could you use some creativity? You know, where,
Authoritative power.
yeah.
Quickly, can you define that?
Uh, so authoritative is being clear and direct and assertive, not aggressive. Aggressive is I'm going to win, you're going to lose. Authoritative power is I'm going to look for a way for all of us to win. We all get to
Beautiful.
win.
Oh
We
my
all get to
gosh.
win. I'm not going to do it in spite of you, but I have a clear direction that we're going. I want us all to win, and here's what we're going to do.
Wow, what a beautiful place to stop this. So the goal really is to have us all be clear, assertive, and heading in a direction where everybody wins. No one gets left behind, and we all come out ahead that way. Dr. Patrick Scott, if people want to find you, how do they find you?
There is a website, drpatrickscott.com. It's Dr. Patrick Scott, all lowercase.com. Everything's there.
Beautiful. And again, I know you're very, very busy, lots of people you're helping everywhere, and I have been a recipient of that, and I'm eternally grateful. And I thank you for your time. And if you're listening to this, we hope you got something out of it that you can apply. Just something small, a tiny little bit that can shift your life. And maybe 6 months from now, when you've applied it, like it's made a big difference for you. So if that happens for you, please drop a note. Let us know how that happens so others can be inspired and learn from you. And until next time, Katy G out.